A creator gets 47 million views, $143. A brand runs an authenticity campaign, spends $800,000, gets 2,000 likes, not 200,000, 2,000, on $800,000. Nobody asks why. Nobody gets fired. If anything, someone gets promoted. Right. Ever notice how the brands trying the hardest to seem real are somehow the ones that feel the most hollow? Not the small cafe that posts a photo of the burnt croissant batch with, oops, free snacks at the counter. Not the barista who remembers you always asked for extra foam. Those ones are fine. Those ones actually work. The brands, the ones with the strategy decks, the ones who hired an agency specifically to produce authentic content, those ones. Something is going wrong there, and people keep misdiagnosing it. They call it a trust crisis, a credibility gap, a loss of consumer confidence. That framing is almost right, but trust isn't the disease. Trust is the symptom. The actual problem is that authenticity has been industrialized. Actually, that's not quite right. It's been productized. And the moment something gets industrialized, it stops working. Not gradually, immediately. Because the entire mechanism that made it work was that it wasn't a mechanism. The second it becomes a strategy, it ceases to be the thing it was pretending to be. You're not being human, you're running a Turing test, and you're failing it. Here's what that looks like in practice. 2024. A CEO sits in a fast food restaurant, shaky phone camera, stumbles over a word, spills a drop of sauce, looks directly into the lens and says, "I'm just like you." Breakthrough content, huge engagement, brand trust metrics go up. The marketing team puts it in the deck. 2026. The exact same video, and the audience isn't reacting with warmth anymore. They're reacting like forensic analysts. They see the 4K lighting reflected in the window behind the CEO. They hear the post-production audio that's too clean for a restaurant. They clock the stutter not as a real mistake, but as a rehearsed beat, timed, placed, approved. The stutter has a script. The messy table was art-directed. The sauce drop was take 4. Naturally. This isn't authenticity. This is performative imperfection. And there is a difference, and viewers in 2026 feel that difference in their spine before they can articulate it. The brain doesn't process "this felt fake" consciously. It just stops trusting, quietly, without explanation. The engagement drops. The brand increases the budget. The cycle repeats. Nobody connects those two events. Now, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. The problem got significantly worse when AI entered the picture. There are roughly 5.17 billion people on social media right now. Most of them can tell. There's a whole other layer here about creator compensation and platform economics. Actually, that's a different rabbit hole. We'll come back to it, maybe, because the AI part is the part nobody saw coming. And then the weirdest thing happened. AI figured it out faster than brands did. The most successful AI models in 2025 and 2026 are not the perfect ones. That's the counterintuitive part. The ones winning audience trust are the ones with programmed flaws. They have pores, slightly asymmetrical smiles, a messy room in the background with one book left open at an angle. They blink wrong sometimes, just slightly. A stray hair, one shoulder slightly lower than the other. Because the engineers figured out what the marketing teams figured out 2 years earlier. Flaws signal authenticity, so they built the flaws in. Think about that for a second. A synthetic entity can now simulate the human element with 100% brand safety, zero fatigue, zero off-message moments, and at a fraction of the cost of a human creator. And it can be authentically imperfect more consistently than any human could ever manage, because humans left to their own devices are actually too unpredictable to be reliably imperfect. If you're a brand trying to compete on the "we seem real" axis, you are now racing a machine that will always be more consistently messy than you are. You cannot win. The aesthetic of authenticity is officially a commodity. So some brands pivoted. Radical transparency, show the factory, show the margins, post the CEO's salary, invite scrutiny, build trust through disclosure. It didn't work either. Not because transparency is bad, it isn't, but because in 2026, radical transparency reads as a distraction technique. The audience's first question is no longer, "Wow, they're so open." The first question is, "If you're showing me the factory, what are you hiding in the laboratory?" Transparency invites scrutiny. More transparency invites more scrutiny.
You open one door and the audience immediately looks for the ones you left closed. You've paid a transparency tax and received approximately zero additional trust in return. And the reason this matters beyond brands, well, there's a longer conversation there. The brands that wrote thoughtfully about authentic community building and the good frameworks do exist. Hotandsocialmedia.com has a breakdown of exactly this if you want the practical side. Those frameworks are right about the principles: consistency, relatability, real values, correct on all counts. The problem isn't the principles. The problem is that the principles got copy-pasted into strategy documents and handed to agencies with CPM targets and quarterly deliverables. And you cannot systematize the thing that works precisely because it isn't a system. A corner cafe remembers your name because the owner actually remembers your name, not because there's a CRM flag on your account. The moment it becomes a CRM flag, the warmth evaporates, and you're left with a text message that says, "Hi, valued customer," which is somehow worse than saying nothing at all.
There's a pattern here that goes back further than most people realize. Platforms have been running this exact cycle since around 2014, actually longer than that, but 2014 is when it became a business model. Creator fund launches, payouts drop that same quarter, engagement metrics go up, nobody gets fired. Algorithm update promises better reach for original content. Reach drops for everyone except accounts already at scale. Another update follows, same result. The announcement has a different name. Same structure, same result. The blog post calls it an evolution. Brands are now running this same cycle internally. They discover that authenticity drives trust. They systematize authenticity. The systematized version erodes trust. They increase the budget. Repeat. This next part is the part that should bother people more than it does. The human-in-the-loop solution, brands using AI to generate content and then having a human add the soul afterward, doesn't fix this. You cannot sprinkle soul onto a synthetic process. People notice. If the intent is purely algorithmic, purely built around a retention metric, the viewer feels the hollowness, not intellectually, in the gut, before they've watched 10 seconds. The failure isn't the AI. The failure is the intent. A value that always, conveniently leads to higher conversion is not a value. It's a tactic wearing a value's clothes. Look, at this point, the playbook is pretty familiar. Authenticity campaign, transparency campaign, creator partnership. Different deck, same structure. Here's what actually works, and this is almost insultingly simple. Mechanical consistency. Not vulnerability, not behind-the-scenes content, not being human. Just, does your product do what you said it would do? 100% of the time. Because if it does, that is a higher form of authenticity than any transparency campaign you could run. Reliability is the signal. It just doesn't look like content, so nobody puts it in the deck. The brands quietly winning right now aren't trying hardest to seem real. They stopped trying to seem like anything. They became useful, predictably, boringly useful. They function like infrastructure. You don't have a parasocial relationship with your electricity provider. You just need the lights to come on. And when they do, every time, without drama, that's trust. Real values cost you something. Sometimes a campaign, sometimes reach. If your authentic approach has never once required you to sacrifice a metric, you're not being authentic. You're being optimized, which is fine, but don't call it authenticity. And don't spend $800,000, get 2,000 likes, and blame the audience for not feeling it. They felt it. That was the problem. The pattern continues. The budgets increase. The AI avatars get more convincingly imperfect. The transparency tax gets paid. The strategy decks get updated with new terminology. The corner cafe that posts the burned croissant photo still gets more genuine engagement than all of it combined. Nobody in the meeting asks why. The deck says engagement is up, and there's another campaign in Q3, and honestly, the brief is already written, so